The grand hall was silent, but the air throbbed with tension. Light streamed through the towering stained glass windows, catching the edges of golden armor worn by Princess Alara. She stood rigid, her fingers brushing the hilt of her ceremonial dagger, her eyes scanning the shadowed corners of the room. Every noble, advisor, and guard present had frozen, their breaths caught in uneasy anticipation. Outside, a low rumble of distant horns hinted at an approaching threat, a rumor that had transformed into a tangible danger. A group of heavily armed mercenaries, thought to be contained in the borderlands, had appeared at the gates of the castle without warning. Panic had rippled through the servants and guards, but inside this hall, all that remained was a stifled, anxious stillness. Amid this tense atmosphere, the figure of her husband, Callan, stood almost unnoticed near one of the grand marble columns. Unlike the others, he appeared impossibly calm. His dark armor absorbed the flickering light from the chandeliers, giving him an almost shadowed presence. Yet his posture was unshakable. He didn't speak. He didn't fidget. He simply observed. Alara's heart beat faster, not from fear but from a quiet worry. She knew Callan better than anyone. She had watched him train, spar, and survive battles that left others broken. Still, today was different. The whispers of the hall suggested he was merely a noble husband, a supportive figure behind the throne, not a warrior capable of miracles. She knew the truth, but she wasn't certain if the others did. A sudden commotion at the far end of the hall drew her gaze. The massive doors groaned as they swung open, revealing the leader of the mercenaries, an imposing man with a scar slicing across his cheek. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that bounced against the stone walls. "The princess hides behind her husband," he sneered. "Let us see if the man can protect her or if he will crumble like the rest." Alara's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders, the heavy burden of diplomacy and survival entwined. Yet in the corner of her vision, Callan shifted slightly. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, a subtle movement almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver down her spine. The calm in his dark eyes spoke louder than words. The mercenary leader stepped forward, boots clanging on the marble, and motioned for his men to advance. Gasps echoed through the hall. Guards readied their spears, but their hesitation was visible. They had seen warriors fall, and doubt had crept into their hearts. Only Alara and a few trusted aides dared to hold their composure. "Stay behind me," Callan's voice finally cut through the tension. It was quiet, almost gentle, yet every syllable carried undeniable authority. "Do not act rashly. Watch carefully." Alara's eyes met his, and for the briefest moment, all fear melted into trust. She had never known a man so composed, so utterly in control, that even in the face of danger, he seemed untouchable. Yet a subtle ripple of anticipation passed through her. She knew the moment would come when calm would turn into power, when the quiet hand resting on the hilt would release a force that none in the hall could ignore. The mercenary leader stopped, scanning the room, clearly unsure how to proceed. He sneered, raising his blade. "Your protection is nothing, human," he taunted, clearly underestimating Callan. Callan's hand tightened around the sword hilt. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. A strange hush fell over the hall, as if the walls themselves sensed the storm about to break. The light glinted off the polished steel, catching the eye of every observer. In that instant, everyone realized the calm husband was no ordinary man. And when he finally drew his sword, the air itself seemed to shift. The hall fell silent, but a charge of electricity rippled through the crowd. Eyes widened. Gasps froze on lips. Even Alara felt her knees go weak, not from fear but from awe. She had always loved him quietly, deeply, but she had never truly understood the depth of the power he carried, the strength that could protect her and destroy any who dared threaten their world. The first move was coming, the first strike that would define everything. And in that moment, the princess knew. The man she had married was no ordinary protector. The hall seemed to shrink around them as Callan stepped forward, his dark boots echoing against the marble floor. Every eye was fixed on him, every breath suspended. The mercenary leader smirked, clearly expecting hesitation, but found only unwavering calm. Then, in a movement almost too fast to follow, Callan's sword flashed. The steel arced through the air, a blur that caught the light from the chandeliers and turned it into a gleaming ribbon. The mercenary leader barely had time to lift his shield before the strike slammed against it with a sound like thunder. Sparks flew, illuminating the horror and awe on the faces of everyone in the hall. Alara gasped, instinctively stepping forward, only to feel Callan's presence anchor her in place. "Watch," he murmured. "Not everyone can fight with strength alone. Some fights are won with timing, with control." The mercenaries' men lunged, but Callan moved like water. Each swing, each parry was precise, almost elegant. He didn't just fight, he orchestrated the battlefield inside the hall. Pillars became shields, chandeliers hung above him like silent witnesses, and every step he took carved a path of inevitable dominance. One guard whispered, "He's not just human, he's something else." Alara's chest tightened. The pride she felt in her husband mixed with fear she had never known. He moved with a patience that made the attackers impatient, their mistakes piling up like dominoes. Callan's strikes were measured, lethal, and terrifyingly beautiful. With a single motion, he disarmed one mercenary, spun, and forced another against the wall without drawing blood. Yet every enemy knew he could end them with a heartbeat. The mercenary leader's confidence began to crack. He realized too late that the man he had mocked was no ordinary noble, no quiet husband to be ignored. The aura around Callan was not just skill, it was command, a presence that bent the flow of battle without raising a shout. Alara's mind raced. She had married this man believing she knew his strength, but nothing she had imagined came close to this. Every strike, every calculated step, revealed an intelligence and power that made her pulse quicken, not with fear but with wonder. She felt her heart swell with love and admiration. Then the leader made a reckless charge, blade raised high. Callan's sword met his midair, the impact ringing so loud it shook the hall. Dust fell from the ceiling and a chandelier swayed dangerously. The leader stumbled back, shock and rage twisting his scarred face. "Impossible," he shouted. "A human, no, this is unnatural." Callan didn't answer. His eyes were fixed, unwavering. With a fluid motion, he disarmed the leader and sent the sword skittering across the marble. Before the man could react, Callan's blade pressed lightly to his chest, not in cruelty but as a warning. "Leave, now, before this hall becomes your tomb." The leader's confidence shattered completely. He stared, panting, his men faltering behind him. Without another word, he signaled a retreat, and they fled into the shadows outside, leaving the grand hall trembling with awe. The guards, who had frozen in disbelief, slowly lowered their weapons. Whispers of amazement filled the air. Did he just?" one muttered. "I thought humans were weak. I was wrong." Alara's legs felt weak as she approached Callan, her hand brushing his gauntlet. You saved us all," she said, voice trembling. "And you did it so calmly. How?" Callan finally sheathed his sword with a soft, deliberate motion. He looked at her, a faint, reassuring smile touching his lips. "Calm is the strongest weapon of all," he said. "It lets you see what others cannot. It keeps you alive long enough to act when it matters most." She nodded, still in awe. Her eyes lingered on him and a warmth spread through her chest. The man she had married, the quiet, steady husband, was a force of nature she had never fully grasped. And now the castle and everyone within it had witnessed a power that would forever change how they saw him. But even as the echoes of battle faded, Alara felt a chill. The mercenaries' retreat was not a promise of safety, it was a warning. This was only the beginning. Outside in the growing shadows, a new threat waited, one that might test not just Callan's strength, but the limits of his calm. The castle had quieted, but Alara couldn't shake the unease creeping through her chest. The mercenaries' retreat left a hollow sense of victory. It was too easy, too rehearsed, as if their attack had been a test rather than a true assault. She traced her fingers along the marble railing of the grand hall balcony, eyes fixed on the horizon where the last of the enemy disappeared into the mist. Callan stood beside her, silent as ever. His dark armor reflected the fading sunlight, and the calm in his stance remained unbroken. Yet she noticed subtle changes. His jaw was tighter, his eyes sharper, as though he sensed something she couldn't. "They'll come back," he said quietly, almost to himself. "And next time they won't test us, they'll strike to destroy." Alara shivered. Her heart longed to argue, to demand reassurance, but she knew better than to question him. He had already revealed a power she hadn't fully understood, and his judgment had been flawless. Instead, she let herself lean into his presence, letting the strength of the calm husband anchor her. A sudden knock at the hall doors drew their attention. One of the castle's scouts entered, breathless. "Princess, Sir Callan, strange movements in the eastern woods. Shadows, figures we can't identify. They're fast and they move in silence." Callan's hand instinctively went to the sword at his side, the familiar weight comforting. "Prepare the northern watch," he commanded. "Double the patrols, and alert the villagers. They must stay inside until we know what we face." Alara watched him give orders with a quiet authority that left everyone in the room uneasy yet compelled. There was no panic in his voice, no hesitation. He simply acted, his calmness turning every fear into action. She realized with both awe and a twinge of fear that this calm was not just power, it was a shield. Against him, or for him, no one could break through easily. Later that evening, she found him alone in the training hall, practicing movements with his sword. The strikes were deliberate, almost meditative, each one fluid and precise. Alara approached quietly. "You think the mercenaries were only a test?" she asked. Callan paused, sword still in hand, and turned to her. "I don't think, I know. There's someone orchestrating this, someone far smarter than a simple band of raiders. They want to see our limits. They want to see how far a human can hold the line." Her stomach dropped. "How far?" she whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. Callan sheathed his sword slowly, the metallic ring echoing through the empty hall. "As far as it takes," he said. "As far as I take it, and I will protect you no matter what comes." Alara felt the heat rise in her chest, not fear but something stronger. Love, respect, and a deep admiration for the quiet husband who had become a force of nature before her eyes. She stepped closer, resting her hand on his forearm. "You're amazing," she said softly, voice breaking just slightly. I don't know how you do it." He looked down at her, a rare softness in his gaze. "Calm doesn't come from knowing the outcome. It comes from knowing your heart and from knowing who you fight for." A distant sound interrupted them, a rustle from the hall outside, faint but deliberate. Callan's head snapped toward the door, eyes narrowing. "They're testing us again," he murmured. His hand gripped the sword hilt. "And this time it won't just be mercenaries. It will be something worse." Alara's grip on his arm tightened instinctively. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Callan's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Together," he agreed. The night deepened, shadows stretching along the ornate walls. Outside, unseen eyes moved among the trees, waiting. Alara sensed it, a presence heavier than before, calculating and patient, watching their every move. The calm husband might have won the battle in the hall, but the war was only beginning. And in the heart of the castle, with the flickering torchlight casting long, restless shadows, Alara knew one undeniable truth. No force in the world could break them if they stood side by side. But the question lingered in the air like smoke. Would calm be enough against what was coming next? The castle walls shivered under a cold wind that carried a strange, metallic scent. Alara paced the balcony above the courtyard, her fingers tightening around the golden railing. Below, the soldiers patrolled in careful, uneven lines, their eyes darting toward the tree line where shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. Callan appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. His dark armor absorbed the faint moonlight, making him look almost unreal, part guardian, part predator. He didn't speak at first, merely scanned the horizon with a sharp intensity. Then he finally said, "They've been watching us for hours. They're learning." Alara's chest tightened. "Learning what?" she asked, though a part of her feared the answer. Callan's gaze didn't leave the trees. "Our weaknesses and our strengths. Calm will keep us alive, but sometimes even calm is not enough if the enemy adapts faster than we can act." Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Then we adapt faster," she said, gripping the railing as though drawing courage from it. A sudden rustle from the courtyard made them both tense. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a speed that made the soldiers cry out in alarm. The creature was humanoid but taller, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural intelligence. Its movements were fluid, almost predatory, and it carried a weapon unlike any sword Alara had ever seen, black steel twisted like a living shadow. Callan drew his sword with a soft whisper of steel, the motion smooth, deliberate, and terrifyingly precise. "Stay behind me," he instructed, voice calm but commanding. "Watch, learn, and don't interfere unless necessary." The figure lunged forward, and the first clash rang out like a storm cracking open the night. Sparks flew as steel met steel, each strike a challenge and a statement. Callan's movements were both art and fury, a combination of disciplined technique and raw, instinctual power. The shadowy warrior twisted, dodged, and attacked with uncanny speed, yet every move was countered with elegant precision. Alara's breath caught as she watched. Every swing of Callan's sword seemed to defy expectation. The fluidity of his combat, the way he anticipated the enemy's motions before they happened, made it clear he wasn't just skilled, he was extraordinary. The shadowy warrior grinned beneath its mask, clearly enjoying the test. "So, this is the human they spoke of," it hissed. "Calm, patient, but how long can you hold?" Callan didn't answer. He simply moved, his sword cutting a path that felt almost effortless. One moment the enemy was advancing, the next they were off balance, struggling to regain footing. And yet Callan's strikes were never cruel. He disarmed, deflected, and controlled the fight without taking life, except when absolutely necessary. Alara's heart surged with admiration and fear. She had seen him in battle before, but never like this. Never with the weight of expectation, the pressure of protecting everyone in the castle, and yet with such serene command. He was a storm contained in human form. The shadowy figure paused, tilting its head, studying him like a scholar. "Interesting," it muttered. "You're calm, it's unnatural, but is it enough?" Callan's eyes met the figure's, calm and piercing. "Calm is not weakness," he said. "It is the foundation of strength." Then, with a movement so sudden it stole the breath from Alara's chest, Callan disarmed the creature completely, sending its weapon clattering across the courtyard. He stepped forward, the tip of his blade resting lightly against the shadow's chest, an unspoken warning that resonated through the air. The creature hissed, retreating into the darkness, but not before leaving a chilling promise. "This is only the beginning, human. They will come. You cannot stop what is coming." The castle seemed to shiver at the words, the wind howling through the battlements like a warning. Alara descended to stand beside him, her hand brushing his gauntlet. "Who are they?" she asked, voice tight with fear and curiosity. Callan looked out into the night, his expression unreadable. "Enemies," he said softly, "but more than that, something ancient, something patient, and they've decided to test us." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always trusted her husband's strength, but now the calm she had leaned on seemed both a shield and a warning. If even he was being tested, what chance did the rest of them have? And as the moonlight fell across the courtyard, casting long, stretching shadows, Alara realized one undeniable truth. The quiet, calm husband she thought she knew had only just begun to show the depth of his power, and the true storm was yet to come. The castle slept uneasily that night. Torches flickered in the corridors, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. Soldiers whispered of the shadowy figure that had vanished into the night, their voices tinged with both fear and awe. Alara paced the corridors, unable to rest, while Callan moved silently ahead, inspecting barricades, checking every angle, every possible point of attack. "This is no ordinary assault," Callan said, his voice low but firm. "They've studied us, waited for the right moment. They know our routines, our guards, even our fears." Alara's stomach tightened. "Then how do we stop them?" Callan didn't answer immediately. He knelt briefly, adjusting the placement of a barricade, then stood tall, eyes sweeping over the courtyard below. "We fight smarter," he said finally, "faster, and we fight together." As dawn broke, the first hints of movement appeared along the forest edge. Dark figures slipped like shadows between the trees. Soldiers tensed, ready for command. But it was Callan who acted first. He moved through the ranks like a conductor, positioning men, predicting enemy movements before they occurred. His calmness radiated, infusing the soldiers with confidence, steadying their nerves. Then, without warning, the first wave of attackers struck. Unlike the mercenaries before, these were disciplined, trained, not mindless raiders but assassins, elite and silent. They struck with precision, aiming to overwhelm through speed and terror. Callan met them with his sword drawn, every movement precise, every strike controlled. He didn't just fight, he dictated the battle. Opponents fell back, disarmed, sometimes alive, sometimes incapacitated, but never without leaving a mark of awe on everyone watching. Alara followed from the battlements, watching him move, heart-pounding. Her admiration was mingled with fear. Each clash of steel was a reminder of the danger they faced. Each calculated strike a reminder that this calm man could wield devastating power. One assassin broke through the front line and lunged toward Alara herself. The princess froze for just a heartbeat, but then Callan appeared, moving faster than she could follow. His blade intercepted the attack midair, twisting the weapon aside with a whisper of steel. He stepped forward, pressing the tip of his sword lightly against the attacker's chest. "Do not come closer," he said, calm and unshakable. Alara's knees almost buckled under the intensity of the moment. She realized that every life he saved, every move he made, was not just skill. It was his heart guiding him, his love and his commitment shaping every strike. The battle continued through the morning, shadows falling and returning as if the sun itself feared to witness the fight. Callan's calm never faltered. Even when surrounded, even when outnumbered, he remained a pillar of serenity, turning chaos into order with a single movement. Soldiers who had once doubted human capability watched in awe, whispers spreading like wildfire. No human could move like that. No one could command calm so fully. By midday, the attackers began to retreat, confusion and fear replacing their previous confidence. The shadowy figure from the night before appeared at the edge of the battlefield, observing, silent and calculating. It didn't move to fight again. Instead, it stepped back into the forest, leaving a lingering promise. The war was far from over. Alara descended into the courtyard, rushing to Callan's side. Her face was flushed, her hair loose from the chaos of the morning. You saved everyone," she said, voice trembling. "And you didn't even seem angry." Callan sheathed his sword, his dark eyes meeting hers with that quiet intensity that always made her heart skip a beat. "Anger is for those who cannot control themselves," he said softly. "Calm is the true strength, and it saves more lives than rage ever could." She reached up and touched his armor, fingers brushing against the cold steel. "I never truly understood until now. You're more than anyone could imagine." Callan's lips curved in the faintest smile. "And you," he said, "see me for who I am. That is why I fight." The castle walls still bore scars from the attack, the courtyard littered with discarded weapons and armor, but for the first time, hope threaded through the tension. Yet Alara felt it, the lingering unease that this was just the beginning. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the forest, greater dangers waited, testing the limits of even her calm, extraordinary husband. And deep down, she knew that when they returned, the next battle would demand more than courage, more than skill. It would demand everything they had together. The castle had quieted once more, but the sense of unease clung to the walls like a shadow. Soldiers patrolled with tense vigilance, eyes darting toward the forest beyond the gates. Ilara and Callan stood together in the highest tower, watching the horizon where the trees swayed unnaturally, as if alive. "They're not gone," Callan said, voice low and steady. "They're regrouping, waiting, watching us." Ilara's grip on the railing tightened. Why? Why would they test us like this instead of attacking straight away? Callan's gaze hardened. Because it's not just about strength. It's about fear, doubt, and control. Whoever is behind this wants to see if a human can rise above every expectation, above every obstacle. They want to measure the limits of calm and courage. A sudden noise below the tower caught their attention, a messenger sprinting, eyes wide with urgency. He skidded to a stop, panting, holding a sealed scroll. Callan took it with careful hands and broke the wax seal, his brow furrowed as he read. "They know our strategies," he murmured. "Not only that, they've infiltrated the city. Someone inside is guiding these attacks, feeding them information." Ilara felt a cold dread settle over her. "Inside," she whispered. "You mean one of our own?" Callan's dark eyes met hers, calm but unflinching. "Yes. Someone close enough to know our movements, our defenses, someone we trust. And that makes this far more dangerous than anything we've faced so far." The revelation struck like lightning. The calm husband she had marveled at before now seemed almost otherworldly in the way he processed the danger. He didn't panic, didn't yell, didn't lose control. Instead, he immediately began planning, mapping every potential threat, considering every possibility. "We need to find them before they strike again," he said. "And we need to be ready for anything because this is no ordinary enemy. They're precise, patient, and relentless." Ilara watched him move with a quiet intensity that made her chest tighten. He was more than a husband. He was a force of nature, a strategist, a shield, and now, she realized, the last line between the castle and annihilation. As night fell, they held a council in the war room, the scroll spread across the table. Callan spoke quietly but firmly, issuing orders that felt like commands and poetry simultaneously. Soldiers and advisors alike felt their nerves settle under his calm authority, even as the weight of the threat pressed down on them. Hours passed, plans were set, and every precaution was taken. And yet, as the first stars of midnight appeared in the sky, Ilara could sense something beyond strategy, something deeper. The infiltrator was clever, bold, and confident. They weren't merely challenging the castle's defenses. They were challenging her husband, testing the limits of the calm he carried like armor. Callan stood at the window, watching the dark forest. "They'll make their move soon," he said softly. "And when they do, I will need to show them just how far calm can reach. Not just to protect this castle, but to protect the people I care about. To protect you." Ilara stepped close, her hand brushing against his gauntlet. "I believe in you," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Always." A faint smile touched his lips, the first genuine warmth she had seen all night. "Then we face them together," he said, his tone quiet but resolute. "And we will not falter." The wind whispered through the tower, carrying a chill that seemed almost alive. Somewhere in the shadows, the infiltrator moved, unseen, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. But they did not yet understand the depth of Callan's power, the extent of the calm that could turn strategy into lightning, hesitation into defeat. And as the moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the castle walls, Ilara knew one undeniable truth. The next encounter would not just test skill or courage, it would test the very essence of human resolve. The calm husband, she realized, was about to become a storm. The castle stood on a knife's edge, the night air thick with anticipation, Every torch flickered as if aware of the danger creeping through the corridors. Alara followed Callan silently, her hand brushing his arm for reassurance. The infiltrator had struck, leaving traps and misdirection in their wake, but Callan's calm guided every step, every decision. "They're close," he murmured, voice steady. "We'll know them when we see them. Stay close. Trust only what you see and feel." Alara's heart pounded, not from fear but from the intensity of being beside him. She had seen his strength before, had felt the aura of control that turned chaos into order. But now, in the shadowed corridors of the castle, it felt infinite, like standing next to a force the world could not bend. A shadow moved across the wall. Callan stepped forward, sword drawn, light glinting on the blade. The infiltrator emerged, a figure cloaked in darkness, eyes sharp and calculating. "So, the human who thinks he can command calm," the figure hissed, voice dripping with challenge. "Tonight we will see if your composure holds." Callan didn't flinch. His sword lifted in a single, smooth motion, the blade reflecting the torchlight like liquid steel. "Calm is not weakness," he said. "It is precision, patience, and purpose, and it will protect what is mine." The infiltrator lunged, a blur of motion, but Callan's defense was flawless. Every strike was met, every feint countered, yet he moved with an elegance that left no room for error. Alara watched, breathless, as her husband transformed into a whirlwind of controlled power, his calm turning the tide with every heartbeat. Sparks flew, weapons clashed, and the castle echoed with the sound of battle. Yet even amid chaos, Callan's calm never wavered. It was a quiet storm, invisible but undeniable, guiding his actions with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Each move predicted the enemy's next. Each parry pushed them closer to defeat. The infiltrator faltered, frustration and awe twisting their features. "Impossible," they spat. "A human, no ordinary human could." Callan's blade cut through the sentence, disarming the figure with the gentlest touch, yet the weight of command in that gesture was absolute. The infiltrator fell to their knees, breathing heavily, realizing that calm had outmatched skill, patience had outmatched aggression, and resolve had outmatched deception. Alara rushed forward, her heart swelling with pride and love. You've done it," she said, touching his arm. "You saved us again, all of us." Callan lowered his sword, his dark eyes softening as they met hers. "Not alone," he said. "You, the people, the soldiers, we face everything together. Calm is only a part of strength. Trust, unity, and courage carry the rest." The infiltrator rose, bowing their head in reluctant respect. "I underestimated you," they admitted. "You are unlike anything I imagined. The human has become legend." Outside, dawn broke, casting golden light across the castle. The walls that had trembled under fear now gleamed with hope. Soldiers cheered quietly, awestruck by the man who had turned a night of terror into a victory with nothing but calm and steel. Alara looked at him, golden light illuminating the edges of his dark armor. "I never thought I could feel this proud," she said softly, voice thick with emotion. "Of anyone." Callan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "And I never thought I could fight for someone worth this much," he said. "You remind me why calm is not just a tool, it's a gift. And today it saved us all." For a moment the world seemed still. No shadows lurked in the hall, no enemies stirred beyond the gates. The storm had passed, leaving only the quiet, powerful truth of a man who had revealed his true strength, not through rage or violence or fear, but through calm, unwavering resolve. Alara leaned against him, heart swelling. Together they had faced impossible odds, and together they had emerged victorious. And though the future held more challenges, more shadows, and more tests, one thing was certain. As long as he remained calm, as long as they faced the world side by side, nothing could break them. The grand hall, once tense and fearful, now resonated with triumph and hope. And at the center of it all stood the calm husband, sword sheathed, eyes steady and heart unshakable, a true force of human strength, love, and courage.